basically on the antenatal hydronephrosis and how we can interpret antenatal hydronephrosis on ultrasound. As you all know, that ultrasound modality is now very frequently used for the antenatal scans, and because of its widespread use and easy availability, lot of antenatal scans, they are being diagnosed with the dilatation of the pelvic ileal system, what we call as hydronephrosis. Because of this widespread use, the management and the protocols have changed over the last 2 to 3 decades. And but still, there are a lot of challenges in the management of antenatal hydronephrosis, because still we are not very much sure about the exact terminology, exact standard of care and the follow-up of these patients. So hydronephrosis is basically dilatation of renal pelvis, and about 1 to 5% of all pregnancies, they have dilatation of the renal pelvic ileal system. But there's still very wide spectrum of abnormalities. It can vary from the mild dilatation of the renal pelvic ileal system to severe dilatation to severe obstructive uropathies with bilateral hydrouteronephrosis. But still, there is lack of consensus as far as the definition, the classification, and the grading of the hydronephrosis is concerned. And this always adds on to the physician uncertainty and the parental anxiety. Recently, there has been a multidisciplinary consensus regarding the terminology and regarding the standard of care, and terminology urinary tract dilatation has been recommended instead of hydronephrosis. So this terminology, they have recommended this terminology just to make a uniform system of classification as well as the follow-up of these patients. It is very important that we need to differentiate the pathological versus non-pathological, obstructed versus non-obstructed system, because as we all know, many of these hydronephrosis, which are mild, they are transient hydronephrosis. And we should be able to detect in time the pathological hydronephrosis so that a timely intervention can be done and we can avoid any sort of uropathies in these patients. Now, as I've said, that there can be a very wide spectrum of urinary tract dilatation. It can vary from transient dilatation, which can be seen in around 40 to 90% of the cases. It can be true obstruction, which can be seen in 20 to 50% of the cases, and this true obstruction can finally lead to the obstructive uropathies. And it can be because of the vesico-ureteric reflux, which is seen in 10 to 20% of the cases. So most of this hydronephrosis is basically mild and transient, and it is important that this needs to be identified, and these are the patients who needs to be managed conservatively and should be followed. Now, most of the time, when we detect this antenatal hydronephrosis antenatally, the final diagnosis is confirmed only during postnatal investigations, which can be ultrasounds or which can be the renal scans or VCUG studies. Now, ultrasound is very easily available. It is one of the radiation-free modalities, and it gives you a lot of information. So previously, we used to just look for the dilatation of the pelvic ileal system, but nowadays we can get a lot of detailed information about the renal system, ureter, pelvic ileal system, and the urinary bladder, and also about the posterior urethra. So one of the most studied parameters on renal hydronephrosis is the antero-posterior diameter. So ultrasound is a very good modality to give you the readings about the antero-posterior diameter. And as you can see that this is a longitudinal section of the kidney, and this is the pelvis, that's the ureter. And this anteroposterior diameter, that is the diameter of the pelvis, is taken in the transverse plane. So this is the transverse plane of the kidney, and this is the dilated pelvis, and this is the anteroposterior diameter of the pelvis, which is normally measured in these patients for to grade the hydronephrosis and also to follow these patients. Now, this measurement should be taken within the renal parenchyma. It should not be beyond the renal parenchyma, which we call as the extrarenal pelvis. So even as a clinician, we should always ask our sonologists that we need an anteroposterior diameter that to be taken in the transverse plane within the renal parenchyma. So this is the ultrasound picture showing the transverse anteroposterior diameter in the transverse plane. Now, the Society of Fetal Urology for the first time in 2010 came with a classification of hydronephrosis and the grading of the hydronephrosis on the basis of the anteroposterior diameter. And they classified the diameter into mild, moderate, and severe types. So during second trimester of pregnancy, anything which was less than 4 mm was considered to be normal. Anything which was more than 10 mm was considered to be the severe hydronephrosis. During third trimester, anything less than 7 mm was considered to be normal, and anything more than 15 mm was considered to be the severe hydronephrosis. Now, this has really helped us in not only the classifying the severity of hydronephrosis, but also in deciding the management required in these patients and also the follow-up. And it has been observed that the patients who are falling under the category of mild hydronephrosis, only around 10% of them, they will have some postnatal pathology and might require some sort of intervention. Almost 40% of them where we don't require, only 40% of these patients will, with moderate hydronephrosis, will remain asymptomatic. And in the cases of severe hydronephrosis, almost 80 to 90% of these patients, they will end up with some sort of intervention and they will have a pathological hydronephrosis. So this is how the grading of hydronephrosis on the basis of AP diameter has helped us in classifying these patients and prognosticating these patients. Now, in the year 2014, it was again realized that we still have a lack of uniformity in the classification system. And it has been observed that the various terminologies have been used, like pylectasis, pelvic calyceal system fullness, or even hydronephrosis. So a multidisciplinary consensus has been decided involving the various societies, including the Society of Fetal Urology, Society of Pediatric Nephrology, Pediatric Radiology, and they had a uniform consensus that instead of calling as hydronephrosis or pylectasis, a term called urinary tract dilatation should be used in these patients. And this has really helped us in further classifying the severity of hydronephrosis, not just on the basis of anteroposterior diameters, but also other parameters which you can easily observe on ultrasound scans. So now it is not just on the basis of AP diameter, also we look for the calyceal dilatation. So now a lot of emphasis has also been given on the dilatation of the calyces, which can be a central dilatation or which can be also a peripheral dilatation. Although peripheral dilatation is considered to be a more severe form of dilatation. Also, ultrasound tells us about the thickness of the parenchyma, which includes the cortex as well as medulla. Appearance of parenchyma is again very, very important, which ultrasound can tell us. It can tell us about the echogenicity. It can tell you about the corticomedullary differentiation and also about the presence of cortical cysts. Normally, the parenchyma echogenicity is the same as what you see the echogenicity of the liver or spleen. But if it is more brighter than liver, then we call it as a hyperechoic, and it is suggestive of some sort of the dysplasia in the kidney. Kidneys can also make out the dilated ureters, or normally the ureters are not visualized. But if the ureter is dilated, persistently dilated, then it can be made, you can easily observe them on ultrasounds. Ultrasound will give you idea about the wall thickness of the bladder, presence of ureterocele, dilated posterior urethra, or distended bladder, which are all findings which are suggestive of some sort of pathology, and also unexplained oligohydramnios. So ultrasound gives you a lot of information, and these are the 7 points which should always we keep in mind and tell our sonologists to give details about all these points. So it is not just AP diameter which is important, it is also other associated findings which are important, which can help us in categorizing these patients, in grading these patients, and also in the following these patients. Now, as per these multidisciplinary consensus, which has called the dilatation as a urinary tract dilatation, and they have classified the dilatation on the basis of the gestational age. Now, whenever during early gestation, that is less than 27 weeks, anything which is 4 mm was considered as a normal. For, gestational age more than 28 weeks, anything which is less than 7 mm was considered as normal. And postnatal ultrasound, which is done after 48 hours, anything which is less than 10 mm was considered to be normal. So these are the normal values, and anything more than this should be considered as the urinary tract dilatation. Now, as I have already mentioned, that ultrasound findings will let us know that what is pathological and what is non-pathological. So anything less than 4 mm in early gestation, less than 7 mm in late gestation, and less than 10 mm postnatally is considered as normal. But other normal findings are that there should not be any calyceal dilatation. There should be a normal parenchymal thickness. There should be a normal parenchymal appearance. Ureters should be either not visualized or they should not be dilated. The bladder should be normal, and there should not be any unexplained cause of oligohydramnios. So if the antenatal scan shows all these findings in normal limits, then we can always call it as to be a normal antenatal scans. Now, some of the antenatal scan findings, I would like to show the pictures. Like as you can see, this kidney is hydronephrotic, showing the dilatation of the pelvis, the calyceal dilatation. There's a parenchymal thinning, and also there's a presence of the cortical cysts. You can always compare the parenchyma with the opposite normal kidney while doing the ultrasound scan. If you observe this ultrasound picture image, here you can see that the renal parenchyma echogenicity is almost similar to the echogenicity of the liver. So it is isoechoic to the liver, but here the kidney appears more brighter as compared to the liver. So this is a hyperechoic kidney. Now, as I have said, a lot of emphasis has now been given to the calyceal dilatation. So in this picture, you can see that this is the pelvis, this is the dilatation of the central calyces, and then further, these are the dilatation of the minor calyces, which you can make out on the ultrasound scan. So dilatation of the calyces, minor calyces, again suggests the severity of the obstruction. Again, here you can see there's an echogenic renal parenchyma with cortical cysts, trabeculated bladders. Now, this you can see a thickened bladder with a keyhole sign, which is very classical of the posterior urethral valve and the dilated uterus. So basically, the ultrasounds can give you a lot of information besides just measuring the anteroposterior diameter of the pelvis. Now, depending on this multidisciplinary consensus, they have classified the antenatal urinary tract dilatation into 2 groups, low risk group and the increased risk group. So low risk group, basically when in the early gestation, the AP diameter is less than 7 mm, and in the late gestation, when the AP diameter is less than 10 mm, with no central or no calyceal dilatation, they have been labeled as a low risk group. So early gestation less than 7, late gestation less than 10, without any other associated abnormalities, it's a low risk group. But if AP diameter is more than 7 mm, during early gestation and more than 10 mm during late gestation, with or without all these abnormalities like dilatation of the calyces, abnormalities of the parenchyma, abnormal appearance of the parenchyma, abnormal ureters, bladder abnormalities, unexplained hydrocephalus. It has been labeled as an increased risk group. So now, depending on these findings of the ultrasound, you can always categorize the patients as a low risk group and the increased risk group. The increased risk groups, they have more tendency of having a pathological urinary tract dilatation, and they might end up with some or the other form of interventions, and yes, requires a more close follow-up. So similarly, the postnatal presentation has been categorized into three risk groups: low risk, intermediate risk, and the high risk groups. Now, the low risk basically is a dilatation which is less than 15 mm with central calyceal dilatation only. Intermediate risk is the dilatation which is more than 15 mm, but it also includes the dilatation of the peripheral calyces and the abnormal ureters. More than 15 mm dilatation is considered to be the high risk group, along with the other associated abnormalities of the calyceal dilatation and the parenchymal dilatation. So this is the postnatal. Whenever there is a postnatal presentation, the three groups have been assigned, that is the low risk, intermediate, and the high risk group. Now, it has been observed that whenever the anteroposterior diameter is less than 8 mm during second trimester, then the chances of resolution are almost as high as 80%. But if it is more than 9 mm, then the chances of resolution are less than 15%. Also, if there's a persistent dilatation of the urinary tract system during second and the third trimester, the risk of having pathology is almost as high as 40%. So these are some of the points which can help us in prognosticating these patients, and also can help us in counseling the parents and planning a management after the delivery. So as you all know, the ultrasound scans, they are normally done after the 48 hours of the delivery, unless and until you are suspecting any bladder outlet obstruction, or whenever there is a bilateral hydronephrosis, because early ultrasound scans can be misleading because of the poor hydration state of the child. Even if the initial ultrasound is normal and the antenatal scan is showing urinary tract dilatation, this should be repeated and this should be followed. Vesico-ureteral reflux is the only uropathy in which urinary tract dilatation does not correlate with the ultrasound findings. So this is again a very important point. So to conclude, still there are a lot of challenges in the management of hydronephrosis, because still there is no standard terminology, no standard classification, and no standard protocol which is available. Even if it is a mild dilatation, it should not be ignored, and these patients should still be followed. It is very important to remember that these three figures, that is less than 4 mm during 28 weeks is normal, less than 28 weeks of gestation is normal, less than 7 after 28 weeks of gestation is normal, and less than 10 mm postnatally is normal. So anything exceeding these figures should be considered as abnormal, along with the other red flag signs which I have already mentioned. And if there is any concern regarding the severity of the dilatation or about the any other findings, we should always sought the opinion from a pediatric urologist, surgeon, or the nephrologist.